I'm glad that Mormon saw fit to include the story of Korihor in his epic, in his hyper-evangelion. Should I be glad that there was such a guy as Korihor? Should I be glad that there are people like that pop up all the time? I mean, if it's not one, it's probably another. I mean, it's a common sort of malady of the spirit that manifests itself in people, that they cop this attitude. And Korihor's an interesting case study. He's like this, presenting the image, presenting the whole story is more effective in showing this than trying to spell out, like King Benjamin said, I can't tell you all the different ways that you can commit sin, all the ways that you can go wrong, and if you have a good example or a bad example that you can go back to and consider and reflect on and analyze in depth, that helps you understand. And it's not a matter of, it's not something simple. And when I was younger, I was taught the story of Korihor in kind of a simple, kind of a naive way. Oh, Korihor didn't believe in God. He was wrong because planets. Atheists are evil. And whether this was what people intended to really teach me, or whether it was just what my undeveloped mind was able to absorb and kind of made as an interpretation, I'm not going to bother myself about it right now, but it's a totally inadequate, shallow interpretation of the case study, the example of Korihor. The interesting thing about him is that he seems similar to people who aren't just atheists. I mean, I've encountered people who just don't believe in God, but they still want to, they're still humane. They still have a sense of morality and decency. And in fact, the thing that Korihor does is he kind of appeals to a sense of conscience. He kind of appeals to a sense of morality and decency in critiquing, indicting the regime of the reign of the judges, the Zarahemla civilization. He indicts this regime as if it were illegitimate, as if it were unjust, using legitimate criticisms that would be justified, that would be effective and, true. They'd be genuine causes for objection against an unjust regime. He kind of reminds me of Anton LaVey, who seemed to be mostly upset that religions get corrupt and religious people are hypocrites. Maybe it's not entirely that. He's kind of echoing what William Blake was trying to articulate in his Marriage of Heaven and Hell, where he set up this opposition between concepts of good and evil, with good being essentially passivity. What did he say? The passive that obeys reason. But you might say, passivity that only does what it's told. Kind of a fear to act on your energy, a fear to use what is yours, right? A fear of, it's kind of like a melancholic timidity. I do suspect that there are a lot of people, maybe, more or less like me, who have a fear of failure, a fear of action, for whatever reasons of whatever wounds we carry. We have a fear that accompanies us through life and makes it hard for us to act boldly and to go out and try to get what we want. And even now, like the concept and the idea of just going out into life and getting what I want just feels deeply wrong to me. Now I've come to the point where I recognize that doesn't mean that I am entirely correct in my feelings here. I could be, I think I'm suffering from some kind of something wrong. There's something wrong with that. It's still, it's complicated. It's complicated because I look around at the way a lot of people live, and it seems to me there's a lot of needless greed and shallowness in the way that a lot of people live, just wanting to get stuff out of life and just get what they want. And Korihor is such an appealing model of the fearless determination to just live life to the fullest, in a way. And it's mental work for me, and I think people like me, to disentangle our own individual psychology and our own individual emotional wounds and problems with how we're able to act in the world and what's actually moral. So Blake sets up this critique of organized religion in his day as teaching people to be passive and to just take orders and just take their sense of right and wrong and of morality and of truth just from what other people tell them, from dogmas. I guess like George Orwell, the party just tells you to override your own perception. If the party tells you 2 + 2 is 5, then you just override what you see and what you can reason on, what you can know. And that is an evil thing. And so to keep people down and to keep people in a state where their sense of truth is dependent on an external authority instead of their own capacity for perception and reasoning and reflection, and to completely, to denigrate the individual human capacity to arrive at an understanding of truth, and say, no, you just have to march in step with the reed from the central antenna. Yeah, that is an evil thing. And so for Korihor to level that criticism against the regime in which he lived was a very cunning spell, because it's hard to gainsay that. You don't fight that by saying, well, the right way to live righteously is to just do what you're told. We can't think too much because we should just do what we're told and be passive, and it's right to object against that. So it's hard to put too much blame on people in our day and age who have been brought up with that kind of programming of just do as you're told and don't ask questions. And people say, no, I have a right to ask questions. I have these things that I see, and you're telling me that I should just ignore them. And I have these abilities, and you're telling me to let them waste away. No, I don't accept that, and I'm going to go and I'm going to use what I have, and I'm going to try to pursue maybe excellence or pleasure. There's a difference. And there's a difference between, say, principled, humane atheists and agnostics, and the malignant kind that are just wanting to spread anger and rebellion, or that just want to pursue pleasure. At the root, it does kind of share this kind of nihilism that this life is all there is, and so those that have, it's instead of he who has ears to hear, let him hear. It's like he who has brains, brawn, and balls, let him seize the day and get the most out of it for himself. In the United States of America, with our classical liberal setup, and I suppose in the first world, in the, say, Northern European, mostly social orders where there's this kind of close to this this classical liberal order of allowing you to do things that were considered sinful in the past, allowing you to pursue pleasure if it doesn't infringe on the rights of others to pursue their pleasure, then it's very congenial to this kind of attitude. If I'm not hurting anyone, I mean, why would I want to go out and do malicious acts of murder and things? I mean, really, when people talk about, oh yeah, I'm so wicked, wickedness, sin, or even evil, I'm not sure if they're really talking so much about the depravity that, really makes me want to sadistically commit, inflict suffering on others, suffering and death on others. It's just that I want pleasure for myself, and I'm just impatient with whatever restrictions or counsels for self-control anybody would put on me, because there's nothing beyond this life. So really, if that were so, then the principal approach would be, let's maintain a secular, classical liberal order of government that secures to all of us the right to get as much pleasure as we can according to our capacity and our daring, as long as we don't violate others' rights to do so. Now, I'm not saying that that's implied consistently or honestly, but that's the ideal, and that's what people like to present themselves as virtuous in upholding and proposing and upholding. Now, I don't think that same kind of level of classical liberal order existed during the reign of the judges in the Zarahemla civilization. I think people like to pretend like the reign of the judges was essentially the United States constitutional order, and I don't see that as justified. So I would expect that the corrosive effect that attitude has on any civilization and society, I think it's corrosive on any society or civilization. I think they're blind to the toxic waste, the effect that has. I think even, the well-meaning American variety or first world variety is just willfully ignorant and blind to the corrosion that inflicts on our society. But I think on the Zarahemla society, the corrosion was quicker and more apparent, which is why the anti-Nephi Lehis were the ones to bust Korihor, because they had kind of taken his counsel to a more logical, principled, consistent distance than he was maybe willing to, and they weren't having it. And Alma the Younger, who had been like Korihor's like a type of Alma the Younger before, without his repentance, he wasn't having it, and he was able to hold up kind of a mirror and sort of show Korihor, you've taken up this sword, now it's your time to feel its bite. You've decided to live by these rules. You've decided that the people that have the brain, bronze, and balls deserve to get more out of life. And so now it's your turn to experience what it's like to be stripped of some of that. Now you're without the faculties that you had before. And according to the rules and the conditions of mortality that you yourself said are the natural and proper state of humanity, now it's your turn to suffer the result of being incapacitated. something about the way that Alma, the younger, deals with Korihor is that he doesn't hate him and he doesn't fear him. And I've reflected on this in thinking about the experiences that I had, the curiosity I had about Satanism. I mentioned Anton LaVey. When I was in high school, I rode the school bus with a bunch of guys who listened to avowedly satanic music. And it wasn't just like, they listened to a lot of different kinds of music, and not all heavy metal is avowedly satanic, for sure. Even death metal, there's an album by the band Death, the album Symbolic, which I cherish. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. It's just phenomenal music. And I've never still really had the nerve to kind of explore the music that people make who are avowedly Satanist. And I think about the way that people like that try to, again, they do appeal to aspects of a human conscience. A lot of their critique of religion, again, seems rooted not... It's kind of... I don't think it's consistent. I don't think they're consistent or honest. I think they're kind of childish. I want to be free to pursue my pleasure without being trammeled by arbitrary rules. But also, your religious people are hypocrites because you're not really that kind or humane. And I'm more kind and humane than you are. Oh, and also you're stupid and I'm smarter. I use my brain, and I can't believe that you'd want people to squander their precious mortality by not developing their intellect, by continuing to just unquestioningly follow certain dogmas. And as an aside, thinking about some of the dogmas of, let's say, low church Protestantism, I don't blame them for that kind of criticism either, because certain dogmas of low church Protestantism are abysmally stupid. So it's a complicated phenomenon. And it occurs to me that part of the manipulation that people who say they're satanic, and it can manifest itself in different ways. There's at least two main organized religions of Satanism in the United States. There's the Temple of Satan, right, in California. They're both in California. Church of Satan, Anton LaVey's Church of Satan, and then the Satanic Temple. Is that it? Well, right. So it seems that there's a tactic or a strategy that I think they engage in of manipulation, of trying to elicit fear and hate in the rest of us. If they can get us to show fear and hate towards them, shock, but I think mostly fear and hate, then they can claim the moral high ground. They are going to bank on this kind of unexamined sense of a right and wrong that's kind of intrinsic to human consciousness, and they can point to traditional religion as violating that because of corruption, hypocrisy, passivity, and so on. I can't remember the name of the book. There's a guy that wrote a book about social engineering, and he identified 7 basic human emotions. There's all kinds of schemes to identify the emotions that humans have. I like the system that this guy has of 7 basic emotions, most of which are negative. Fear and hate, I think, are 2 of them. And they're only 2 of several possible negative emotions. There's also contempt and disgust. And I don't know if he puts pity in. But we don't have to give in to the emotional manipulation of snotty people, of Satanists or malignant atheists. We don't have to buy we don't have to give them too much credit. We certainly don't have to show them, like simpering, kindness. Alma didn't give Korihor credit. He didn't give him the benefit of the doubt. He didn't waste his time being nice to Korihor. He had no time for that. He saw through Korihor. He saw what he was doing to his society, and he brought to him the consequences of the rules that Korihor had set. He said, okay, you want to go? This is what it means. Deal with it, because you've taken this up and now it's your turn. And so there was no wasting time with kindness, maybe pity. He probably pitied him. And pity can be, really, really irritating to people. Don't you pity me? Yeah, I'll pity you, man, because you're misguided and stupid and you're wrecking yourself, and it's a sad thing to see. I'm not going to waste there are things that you don't deserve, and I'm not going to waste them on you. And one of those is maybe you don't deserve my fear or my anger. I'm not going to waste my fear or my anger on you any more than I'm going to waste my soft-spoken, open-hearted, connectedness that's just going to be draw me in so that you can abuse me. No. I've got my boundary up. You don't get to cross this line. So I'm not going to waste that passive, nice, kindness, whatever those sorts of things. I'm not going to waste those on you, and I'm not going to waste my anger or my fear on you, because you're beneath that. And so if I react to you with disgust, and even with contempt, it's no more than you deserve, and I don't owe you anything else. I'm not... I may be trying to be like Jesus, but I have to recognize my limits. And there are ways that the Maker can, and the organizer and the supreme among spirits can perceive your shriveled, angry little soul and hold out to you something, but he's also going to hold you accountable. And so I know my limits, and I don't have to waste those unbecoming emotions. I don't have to weaken myself for somebody who's not going to be worth it. You take up the sword, you die by the sword. So just some insights into... I could continue on this for a while. I've been thinking about this a lot, because lately I've been watching documentaries about death metal and its musicians, and some of them that are, some of them who are avowedly satanic in the way that they present themselves. And it's kind of interesting to see. I've been aware for quite some time that there's been a tendency for people to talk about what sweet, good-natured people Satanists are. Now, there's the psychological effect that angry music can have on helping people to be mellow and polite and gentle in life. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking specifically about people who profess some kind of Satanism, and how there's been a fashion of people to talk about how they're actually, really nice, sweet people, and, maybe really good people, and probably better than all those, religious hypocrites. And it's an appealing message. And I just want to leave with the conclusion that it's deception, and it's not something that we need to fall to give any credit to. We don't need to fall for it, and we certainly don't need to dignify it with our fear or with our hatred, when disgust and pity will do just fine. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you later.